You've watched the shows, studied the manuals, maybe even took that weekend course where some ex-military instructor showed you how to start fires with shoelaces and purify water through your socks. You felt prepared, confident, ready to face whatever apocalyptic nightmare the world could throw at you. Then reality arrived with a crowbar and a bad attitude, and suddenly every piece of survival wisdom you'd memorized proved about as useful as a chocolate teapot in hell. The problem isn't that you're stupid or unprepared. The problem is that survival education has been warped by entertainment value, legal liability, and the fundamental human need to believe complex problems have simple solutions. What you absorbed in that sanitized classroom environment bears about as much resemblance to actual survival as a video game does to real warfare.
The myths you've internalized aren't just incorrect, they're lethally incorrect. The kind of misinformation that gets people killed while they're busy following advice that worked brilliantly for someone else, somewhere else, under entirely different circumstances. Here are 4 survival myths that your training got catastrophically wrong, and why believing them could turn you into fertilizer for future generations to stumble over. Myth 1. You can survive 3 weeks without food. The rule of threes is survival gospel. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. It's drilled into every course and repeated every time someone wants to prioritize survival needs. Food is tertiary, they insist. Focus on shelter and water first, because you've got abundant time before starvation becomes a threat. This is mathematical fantasy masquerading as medical fact. The 3-week figure represents the absolute maximum under perfect conditions: complete rest, optimal temperature, proper hydration, and voluntarily fasting rather than being forced into starvation. Actual survival situations don't provide perfect conditions. You're trudging through brutal terrain, constructing shelter, collecting water, and attempting to signal for rescue while your body temperature swings and stress levels explode.
Your body begins cannibalizing itself within days, not weeks. First, it burns through glycogen reserves. That vanishes in roughly 24 hours of normal activity, 12 hours if you're working intensely. Then it attacks protein, destroying muscle tissue to manufacture glucose your brain requires. By day 3, you're not simply hungry, you're weakened, disoriented, and making mistakes that convert manageable problems into lethal ones. Your immune system collapses almost instantly when food becomes scarce. Minor guts that would ordinarily heal turn infected because your body can't produce white blood cells. Your core temperature plummets because generating heat demands fuel you lack. Your reaction time deteriorates, judgment crumbles, and coordination fails until basic tasks become hazardous.
Meanwhile, you're following advice that says food isn't urgent, so you're not prioritizing hunting, gathering, and foraging. You spend energy on elaborate shelter construction while overlooking edible plants. You focus on water purification while ignoring obvious food sources. By the time you realize how wrong this is, you're too weak to do anything about it. The real rule is that everything matters simultaneously. Spend time gathering food from day 1, even if it's just berries or edible roots. Every calorie extends your survival window and maintains the capabilities you need to solve other problems. Myth 2. Drinking your own urine will keep you hydrated. This myth has achieved urban legend status in survival culture. You'll find it in military manuals and television shows featuring people drinking their own piss with competitive sports determination. The logic seems sound. Urine is water your body has processed, so recycling it should provide hydration when no other sources are available.
This is medical nonsense wrapped in desperation. Drinking urine doesn't hydrate you. It dehydrates you faster while poisoning you, turning a manageable water shortage into acute renal failure. It's like trying to fill your gas tank by siphoning fuel from your own exhaust pipe. Your kidneys produce urine specifically to remove toxins, waste products, and excess salt from your bloodstream. When you drink it, you're forcing your kidneys to process those toxins again, along with new waste products. Each cycle concentrates the toxic load higher, requiring more water to process than you're gaining. The salt content alone accelerates dehydration. Urine contains concentrated sodium your body was trying to eliminate. Consuming it forces your cells to give up water to dilute these salts.
You end up thirstier than when you started, with increased toxin levels that your kidneys must process with less water than they had originally. People who survive drinking urine aren't surviving because of it, they're surviving despite it, usually because they found actual water shortly after or were rescued before renal damage became fatal. The psychological effects might be worse than physical ones, triggering trauma that affects decision-making when you should be focusing on finding actual solutions. Real hydration strategies focus on finding, collecting, and purifying actual water sources. Dew collection, rainwater harvesting, finding springs, locating plants with high water content. These provide clean hydration that supports your body instead of creating additional medical problems. Myth 3. Moss grows on the north side of trees. Navigation by natural indicators is supposed to be traditional outdoor wisdom passed down from generations of woodsmen. The moss on the north side rule is the poster child, simple, memorable, and apparently scientific. Moss allegedly grows on the north side because it's shadier and retains more moisture, giving you a natural compass.
This is botanical nonsense that's gotten more people lost than broken GPS units. Moss grows wherever conditions are favorable, which has nothing to do with cardinal directions and everything to do with local moisture, shade, and air circulation patterns. You'll find moss on every side of trees, rocks, and buildings depending on microclimatic conditions that change from location to location. In dense forests, the north side might be the sunniest side if that's where canopy gaps allow light penetration. Near water sources, moss grows on the side receiving spray, regardless of orientation. On hills, moss favors the side catching prevailing winds carrying moisture. In urban environments, moss grows on building sides that stay damp from drainage or reflected humidity. Using moss as navigation is like determining your location by examining bird droppings patterns. There might be correlation under specific circumstances, but it's so unreliable that depending on it is gambling with your life.
You'll confidently march in the wrong direction because you trust folklore over actual navigation principles. The fundamental problem with natural navigation myths is taking observations from specific locations and generalizing them into universal rules that don't work elsewhere. What might be true in one temperate forest becomes dangerously wrong in another environment. Nature doesn't align with compass directions for lost hikers' benefit. Real navigation requires understanding actual environmental indicators, sun position throughout the day, star patterns, topographical features. Learn to use compass and map, understand how GPS works and fails, recognize landmarks and their relationship to known features. These produce reliable results instead of sending you deeper into wilderness based on moss placement. Myth 4. Building a fire is your top priority. Fire is survival magic. It provides warmth, cooks food, purifies water, signals rescuers, and gives you something to focus on when panic creeps in.
Every survival manual and wilderness course emphasizes fire making as the foundational skill. Get a fire going and you've solved the most critical survival need, or so conventional wisdom goes. This prioritization will kill you in most real survival situations, not because fire isn't useful, but because the time and energy you spend trying to create it prevents you from addressing more urgent threats. Fire making is seductive because it feels productive and provides psychological comfort, but it's often a dangerous distraction. In cold weather emergencies, you'll die from exposure long before you successfully start a fire with improvised materials. Hypothermia can kill in minutes to hours, while fire making with primitive methods takes significant time even under ideal conditions. Trying to create friction fires with numb hands and wet tinder is a losing proposition. Meanwhile, you could be building wind barriers, insulating yourself from ground cold, or signaling for rescue.
Fire requires substantial investment of calories and attention when you're already operating at an energy deficit. Gathering dry wood, preparing tinder, and maintaining flames burns energy you need for other tasks. The smoke disperses quickly and might not be visible to potential rescuers. The light is only useful at night if someone is looking in the right direction. Most survival situations are resolved by rescue within 24 to 72 hours if you're in an area where people might look for you. Your primary goal should be making yourself findable, not recreating primitive camping conditions. Bright clothing, signaling mirrors, whistle blasts, and staying near your last known location are more effective than smoke signals that might blow away from observers. Fire also creates new problems. It requires constant attention and fuel, tying you to one location when mobility might be your best option. It can get out of control, especially in dry conditions, potentially creating a much larger emergency. Smoke inhalation in enclosed shelters can be deadly. Carbon monoxide poisoning kills people who build fires in confined spaces without adequate ventilation. The psychological comfort of fire can work against you by creating false confidence and encouraging poor decision-making. You feel like you've accomplished something significant, which can lead to relaxing your guard or becoming less aggressive about seeking rescue. Real survival priorities depend entirely on your specific situation, location, weather, and resources. Sometimes shelter is most critical, sometimes signaling, sometimes immediate medical attention. Fire might be important, but it's not automatically the most important, and pursuing it at the expense of more urgent needs costs lives. These myths persist because they offer simple answers to complex problems, and humans desperately want survival to be reducible to a checklist that works everywhere. But survival isn't a standardized test with predetermined correct answers. It's a dynamic problem-solving exercise where local conditions, individual capabilities, and available resources determine the best course of action. The moment you stop thinking critically and start following rules blindly is the moment you transform from a survivor into a statistic. Your brain is your most important survival tool. Use it to evaluate your specific situation instead of defaulting to generic advice that might have worked for someone else, somewhere else, under completely different circumstances. The wilderness doesn't care what you learned in survival school. It only cares whether you can adapt to reality fast enough to stay alive.